Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I know people are still Zooming in. We want to welcome you at the Center for the Study of Slavery and Justice. We are presenting a series called This is America, a series of conversations about racial slavery, its legacies, and anti-Black racism. And my name is Nicole Gonzalez Van Cleve. I'm an associate professor at Brown University in the Department of Sociology, and I am the faculty fellow that works on mass incarceration in America. And so I am so excited to do this series of panels where we are talking to people that have lived the violence of mass incarceration and have an important narrative and story to tell. Often people's stories from the system tell us more about the system, its character, its culture, and its intent. And so this panel is assembled to look at people that have advocated for themselves within our legal system when it's failed on so many levels and they have prevailed. Today, I want to introduce one of my collaborators who is also going to moderate this panel. So I get to work with her, and it's such an honor. Her name is Professor Nina Johnson. Her and I are working on creating an archive of mass incarceration through CSREA. And through the Mass Incarceration Lab, we are making sure that we not only just hear these stories, these important stories about people that have been impacted by the criminal justice system and mass incarceration, but we preserve these stories for generations to come. Most specifically, preserve them for the John Hay Library. This event will be taped, and we will make sure that we curate and cultivate it and preserve it for both academics, but also anyone who wants to hear the stories of mass incarceration. Nida Johnson is an associate professor in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology and in the program in Black Studies at Swarthmore College. And so I welcome you today, Professor Johnson. Thank you so much for leading this wonderful discussion.
Well, thank you, Nicole. So happy to be here. And I just want to start with an acknowledgement of the land that I am on, the Lenape lands, and also to just start with gratitude that you all are here and to thank you for your patience. And to say that this group of people I'm really delighted to introduce, some of whom I work very closely with in a think tank of incarcerated and non-incarcerated and formerly incarcerated folks, where we really work in community to address these issues and questions. And I'll just say, for me, the work is really about the abolition of prisons and the carceral state, and even more broadly, the abolition of all oppressive systems, and to start that we stand in solidarity with all oppressed people across the world. Our fight is really about liberation. And again, that we lead with love. And this is about building a better world for all of us, where we have what we need to thrive. And so in that gratitude, I'd like to introduce this illustrious panel of amazing human beings that we get to hear from today. And I'll go alphabetically and just start with my dear friend and brother, Marco Maldonado, also known as Moo, who is a devout Muslim and a trusted, reliable, and caring family member and friend. Happy Eid. He earned his master's degree in humanities while wrongfully incarcerated at Graterford Prison. During his incarceration, Marco also earned his certification as a legal reference aide. Consequently, both of his achievements have led to employment as a legal apprentice for Phillips Black, Inc., a nonprofit private interest law firm that focuses on representing those who were wrongfully convicted, and also as a co-instructor of a college course at Widener University titled Social Work in Prison and Community. Marco is also involved in nonprofit organizations that focus on educating the public about issues of crime and prison. Our second illustrious panelist is Giovanni Reed, and at the age of 16, Giovanni was arrested and ultimately convicted for a crime he did not commit. During his incarceration, Giovanni was able to earn his GED and was given the opportunity to take several college courses offered by Villanova and Temple universities. Giovanni also completed a correspondence course with Blackstone University for paralegal studies. With his education, Giovanni assisted other prisoners with their legal plights and tutored prisoners studying to take their GED. After the United States Supreme Court declared mandatory life sentences for juveniles unconstitutional, Giovanni was able to apply for resentencing. Keep watching the Supreme Court to see what happens with that one. On September 4, 2017, after serving 26 years, Giovanni was released from prison. Giovanni's fight for legal innocence continues in an effort to clear his record of a crime he did not commit. He told his story at Widener University Commonwealth Law School in Harrisburg, PA, and last week for WHYY, our local public television station, for setting the record straight. Since his release, Giovanni has been able to maintain employment working at the Philadelphia airport and supervising the plumbing system at Sarcone's Bakery. Giovanni also does freelance paralegal work and consults with several attorneys regarding their clients' active litigation. And certainly, last but certainly not least, is Theophilus Wilson, who was born in 1971 in the Germantown section of Philadelphia. He graduated from Germantown High School, and thereafter, in 1992, he was arrested for crimes that occurred in 1989, which he did not commit. While incarcerated, he turned jail into Yale, prison into Princeton, and the big house into Harvard. He worked as a law clerk in the prison system for 99.9% of his incarceration, was certified by the state as a legal reference aide, and he also has 2 certificates from the University of Pennsylvania's Law School Prisoner Legal Education Clinic course. Furthermore, he has a constitutional law certificate, and Mr. Wilson has litigated in every single court, both state and federal, including the United States Supreme pro se. On January 21st, 2020, Mr. Wilson was exonerated of all charges. Mr. Wilson works for the law firm Phillips Black, Inc. as a legal apprentice and is the founder and president of the nonprofit, the BITL Foundation. Please join me in welcoming our illustrious panelists today. So glad to speak with you all. I'm so honored to be in your presence and so grateful that I get to be here. Let's start with talking about, and you can feel free to add on to your introductions, but could you talk about what in your initial case allowed you to advocate for yourself? What happened in that initial case, and what allowed you to then circle back and say something wasn't right here, and what did you do?
So who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
I think for me, coming into the system at such a young age, not really knowing and trusting into the attorneys, thinking they had my best interests at heart. That went on for, several years. And I remember, I had a life sentence. So I remember that, I remember writing to my lawyer one day and for several months, asking about the status of my case. And I didn't hear from him. Eventually, he did write me back, and he told me that my case was decided like 4 or 5 months ago, and that it was denied, and my case was put into storage. That's something I just couldn't really understand, given the fact that I felt like there's more litigation that needed to happen. Like, how is my case put in storage? So at that point, I had made a vow to myself that I would never allow anything to happen in my case without me being acutely aware of it. So that's when I began, studying the law. I was around like 17, maybe 18. And, every day, me, Bilal, Marco Mujahid, we all gathered in the law library as a study session, gathering and trying to figure it out, So that's kind of like the one event that set me on a course of trying to get a better understanding.
Well, for me, it was slightly different. When they put me in a paddy wagon, it hurted so bad that I said to myself, I said, man, I got to find out what's going on. So when I went to the Philadelphia Detention Center down in DC, going through what people that's been traumatized and horrified go through, I used to exercise. And one of the ways I exercised was I was playing basketball. So a guy that worked in the law library, and at the time he had about maybe 30 years in, he came down on writ, and he was working, actually running the DC Law Library, Department of the Detention Center's Law Library. So I used to go down to the gym just trying to get some of the stress off me. And I came back one night, and he said, listen, he said, you want to play basketball on the streets. Now I got all these mixed emotions. I'm going through it and I'm just trying to find a release to try to get some of this pain up off me. So he said that to me, and you know, I'm young, and I'm not really listening to him. So the next day, I goes down to the gym to play basketball, and I shot a jumper. And when I shot that jumper, my vision and my feeling of turning jail to Yale, prison to Princeton, and the big house into Harvard, it became a reality. And I shot the jumper, made the jumper. Everybody's running back down the court. I immediately left the gym, went straight to my cell, and I beelined to the law library. And that was in 1992. And from that moment on, I said, I got to stop this pain. And the only way I'm going to stop this pain is that I got to pray, I have to exercise, and I have to learn the law. I have to learn the law. I have to understand, you know, what is happening to me. And although I thought that would bring the pain down to at least 75%, studying the law actually enhanced the pain. Because what it did was, when you start to come out of the matrix and you start to learn what's really happening to you, because at the time I was 19, you know, the pain becomes even greater. You know, they say ignorance is bliss, right? So the pain became greater. The more I learned about the law, the more I started studying, like realizing what's happening to me, and I'm pulling myself out the matrix, right? I'm pulling myself out by education. And that was the beginning of 28 straight years of nonstop litigating and suffering. Every day, all day. I can count basically on two hands how many times I probably missed the law library because it was my fault or I just was lazy. And as Giovanni mentioned, once we got convicted and we all met up at Gratis Fort Penitentiary, we all used to be in the law library working and actually studying law that entire time. And that actually was our major, the study of law.
And I'll share a quick anecdote before I share my story. I met Bilal January 1993, right? And he doesn't know this. So in the detention center, when you're leaving and you're being transferred to like Holmesburg prison or any other jail in the Philadelphia system, when you're walking down a hallway, you can actually see who's in the library, who's in the law library. So while I'm carrying my bag being transferred to Holmesburg prison, Bilal was in the law library. And I remember seeing it. I remember where he was sitting at and everything. So I remember that image. So I can vouch for the fact that, yeah, he definitely, from the very beginning of his incarceration, he definitely was in the law library. My story is a combination of both Giovanni's and Bilal's. You know, I was 19 years old, wrongfully convicted, wrongfully accused of a crime that I didn't commit, actually innocent. I had no participation in the crime. For those of us who might think that, okay, well, maybe I was there or maybe I had something to do with it, but I wasn't the actual perpetrator. I had nothing to do with the crime that I was convicted of. Neither one of us had, Bilal, Giovanni, or myself. And I know enough about their cases to say the same. So with that being said, at 19 years old, being convicted, feeding into the narrative, right? And this is a double-edged sword. And I hope that the public understands what I'm saying, that many people think that part of the problem is that people are wrongfully convicted because they don't have representation, right? And I go on further to say that we don't have effective representation, right? Effective representation guaranteed by the Sixth Amendment of the United States Constitution. However, there's a negative aspect or a negative connotation to that, because what happens is many clients depend on their lawyers to do a lot of the work, right? And one thing that we've all learned, and I'm pretty sure my brothers can vouch for this as well, is that the best client is the client that helps the attorney the most. Like the more you can help your lawyer defend you, the better or the likelihood of success is increased, right? So I unfortunately fed into the narrative saying, well, if I have a good lawyer, my lawyer can do most of the work. I'll be in the law library learning the law, but I don't have to be as invested, right, in the work myself because I have good representation. I'm paying X amount of money. You know, the lawyer has a good reputation, and we all know how that usually ends up. I learned the hard way. So after an exhaustion of resources, I had no more money. I was out of court. The law that I had learned up until that point obviously wasn't sufficient enough to my liking to better present and litigate for myself and to be my own best advocate. So what I did was, through experience, one thing that I learned was I needed to hire an investigator. I hired an investigator. An investigator found a logbook, a visitor's logbook, right? Because my lawyer, my trial counsel never came to see me, never visited me before trial. We had a hearing. He got on the stand and lied that he did. He had the opportunity to correct his false testimony. And when given the opportunity, he in fact doubled down and reiterated that he did, use an investigator and conduct an investigation. All was lies. That actually came out later on, and that'll be hopefully part of the discussion later on. But I fed into the narrative, and I was out of court. So Bilal, myself, Giovanni, and another brother of ours named John Moore, whom we hope to have home soon, we called ourselves the firm. And we would literally help each other in every aspect of litigation and lawyering and advocating that you could possibly think of, whether it was from strategizing, whether it was from investigating, brainstorming, drafting motions, petitions, and this is what helped me, right? Actually, eventually, gain my freedom, right, and help others. But it was the actual point in time that I really had to really step my game up with respect to being my own advocate was when I exhausted all my resources and I couldn't hire an attorney.
Thank you all. I'm going to say a couple of things because one of the things I think is important for people to know, and you all have way more experience, so you can speak to this way better than I can, but my sense is someone who spends a fair amount of time in prisons and knows a lot of incarcerated people, that most people assume that everybody who's incarcerated says they're innocent. So one, I want to correct that. I don't know anybody besides you who I knew before this call, and I feel like we met before Giovanni, but and I know we met before Bilal, but I know Mu, I know you the best, and you were the only one of our community of folks who said they were innocent. That's number one. Nobody made that claim. It is not everybody who's incarcerated who makes the claim that they are innocent or wrongfully convicted. So that's number one. So I wanted to just say that because I think that's people's assumption that everybody who's incarcerated makes that claim, and that has not been my experience. But the second thing is I want to highlight how rare this really is and how hard this really is. It almost never happens. Most people who go to trial are convicted, and that's, wrongfully convicted or not, most people who go to trial are convicted. And so I want to get into, for a second, one, where do you start? You are wrongfully convicted, sentenced to life, which is, I can't imagine that kind of devastation. So how do you begin to look at your own case when you may not have access to case files, when you don't have access to the detective's reports, when you don't have access to all of the things that you might need as an attorney to make a case for an appeal? Where do you start? And how long did it take you from beginning to being welcomed home and returning to us?
I'll start this one off real quick, y'all. it actually took me 28 years, 27 months and 27 years and 11 months to actually get home. But where did I start with the truth? The truth is what actually, was the one thing to hold on to, right? To keep you from going crazy, feeling hopeless, helpless. We all know that sooner or later the truth always comes out. And it was that. It was holding on to the truth. However, being innocent, and I'm pretty sure Giovanni and Bilal can share this as well. We don't have all the facts and details to the story, right? Because we don't know what happened other than what the police and the district attorney are presenting to the public and to the courts, right? So it's like, in my case, I wasn't made aware all the gaps that were in the story in dealing with my case weren't filled until recently, right? Until very recently. So it's a very unique position to be in, right? When you're innocent and you're forced to represent yourself, right, as a pro se litigant, and you're completely disadvantaged because not only do you not have all the materials that you mentioned, Nina, but you also don't know the truth with respect to what actually happened. So all you're doing is operating off of the Commonwealth's version, right? Or the district attorney's story, right? And that's what you're fighting, right? When the truth and reality is completely opposite to that. So how do you prove a negative?
Yep.
Well, I can say that that self-representation is a huge thing. Starting off, I think that I had to rely on, because I was so young and I had no understanding of the law whatsoever. For me, I just began doing like small stuff, learning how to research, shepherdize. This is before we even had computers. So, we was going through the books, trying to understand dicta, why a particular court may make a certain kind of legal conclusion. Like if I got this issue and another guy got the same issue, why do he get relief and I don't get the relief? Trying to understand all of that, and then learning how to write, putting things into a legal writing, making it professional. And stuff, all that stuff take time, especially when you're not sitting in front of a professor teaching you this. So you have to go into overdrive in terms of you have to kind of sort of make your efforts to gain your freedom and get to the truth as your center point. And everything that you do has to revolve around that. It has to really become your life. And if it don't, then you're not going to get much out of it. Like you don't have really the luxury. And when you're trying to reach the truth, you don't have the luxury of playing basketball, playing cards, and doing all of it. You have to really limit yourself and get real serious really fast. So is a huge task. Like I remember when I used to try to explain to people like where you need to begin at in terms of their studies. It's so much to learn that I don't even know where to begin to tell them where to begin, because it's just so much. Like, you have to develop a good habit of just finding out. Like, so with me, when I initially started, I only really started to help myself. It was a process of me, because I didn't see it was fair, like it being fair for me to expect people who wasn't locking in the cell to be advocating and fighting greater for my life than I was fighting for my own self. So I felt like a sense of responsibility that I got to get in there, and at least I could learn it, and I could provide some type of guide to the people that are helping me. So I actually studied for 10 years and maybe like 10 or 12 years before I started setting out helping people. And when I started helping people, I actually got better. Like helping people helped me to get better at what I was doing, because I started learning other areas of the law that I would have never begun to learn had I not opened myself up to that, because I would have only been dealing with the issue that was involved in my own case. So, I mean, it really, 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 really helped me and made me a more rounded person in terms of, you know, just advocating and helping people. And like one of the things that I noticed, you know, just helping people, one of the things that causes people to be convicted, to lose sight of the truth, like Moo was talking about, is that you're relying on a lawyer who goes in and doesn't provide a proactive defense. So what they do is they'll go in, because it takes a whole lot of effort to defend somebody in a criminal court case, especially if it's like a homicide involved. It takes a lot. So when you don't have an attorney who is paid or somebody who's going to really put that work in for you, then what they'll do is they'll go into court and they'll rely on cross-examination as a defense for you, without putting no witnesses on anything like that. And it's kind of hard to overcome a system that is putting all this evidence against you, and then your lawyer is just cross-examining, and that's it. So it's, you know, you gotta really buckle down, and you really, really gotta become your own advocate. I mean, it's like a matter of life and death. Like a big reason why I'm able to sit here, the reason why Bilal is able to sit here and Moo's able to sit here is because we became those self-advocates for ourselves. That was a huge, huge part of the puzzle. So.
Yeah, and just to touch on what you know, very quickly, what Marco mentioned and Giovanni mentioned, in terms of the truth. You know, there's an old saying that the truth is sometimes stranger than fiction. And what happens is, throughout that whole process, the shock of being there, it has two effects on a person. Either they allow it to affect them to the point that they just basically gives up, right? Or it's a serious motivator, right? Because you know you're innocent, you know it. And you're sitting there watching the case they're presenting against you. And like Marco said, you have to go off, and like Giovanni said, you have to go off what they're presenting. And the case has a lot of holes in it. There's a lot of strange things going on. And you have this cloud over your head that everybody says they're innocent. That's not true, right? But you have that cloud over your head. There's so many obstacles that you have to overcome with all this trauma. And you're seeking the truth. So what I did for myself, as I mentioned, I started to like try to get around guys, older guys that knew the law better than I did. They had 30, 40 years in before I even got there. And I took those guys as my professors. And what happened was, for example, one was a master of the English language, right? One was a master researcher, right? And one, he had the best tongue ever in terms of, you know, argumentation. He had Cicero's book, who's considered the first lawyer. And I took from each one of those guys what I understood from them, what was their specialty. And what I did is, you know, I combined that, and I hit them books. I hit the books hard. I learned that there's the Constitution, there's the statute, and there's case law. I learned about the actus reus and the mens rea, the mental elements of a crime, and the actus reus, statutory law, and that's what I focused on. One of them told me, he said, listen, if you want to learn the law, he said, you got to read law reviews on every topic. If you're in the library, just pick up a law review and read the law review. The law review is going to open up your eyes, keeping the fundamentals into play, the Constitution, statutory law, case law. He said, make that your premise and make that your foundation. And then it's going to all come together. You know, get your Black's Law Dictionary. It's a whole different language. And these law reviews, I mean, they really, really help me understand some things. And seeking that truth, it'd be so many holes. And as Moo said, and I can't do the pending litigation. I can't go into a bunch of details, but it took almost 27 years, basically 26 years, 27 years to fill these gaps in. And that's after countless attorneys that was paid for, and also me representing myself, because under no circumstances did I ever sit back and allow no lawyer to just, it's all in his hands. I never did that. I mean, I understand that they was my lawyers and stuff like that, but I always just didn't trust them. I never trusted them. I never trusted them. You know, they were officers of the court, and I never trusted them. So I did the best I could, man, to just stay on, you know, to stay on top of them, man. You know, I still have all those letters. You know, I was worrying them to death, man. I was worrying them to death, man. I mean, every time I find a case that I think it applied to me, I would send it to them. I certify the mail. It's very expensive. You know, most of my money that people sending me, I was using for postage and certified mail slips. I was using it for copies. I was using it for snacks, you know, coffee and cookies to try to, to try to get this thing up off me, man. You know, this trauma, man, you know, you feel the stuff in your bones. I mean, I would literally have nightmares about being out of court. I was never out of court in 28 years. I kept my case live in court, state and federal, sometimes at the same time, with lawyer or without the lawyer. If I had my attorney, he didn't do something, I would go right on that typewriter, type that thing up, and send it in the court. The court would get it, right? And they would docket it and send it to my attorney. Like, look, this is what he do. What you gonna do? So I stayed diligent, and this absolutely became my life. Because as I said, the truth is sometimes stranger than fiction. And because of that cloud, everybody's innocent. Man, I stayed at it, man. I didn't, I mean, all I did was litigate and suffer, because that pain, it's unbelievable, man, that you're having nightmares of not being in court. So I would jump up in the middle of the night and get my pen and pull and you know, start reading notes. You know, I had my wall was filled with stickings and notes. If you ask anybody that know me, I had my TV under the bed, and that's all I did. I'd be sitting there, I'm watching court TV. I said, it's either gonna drive me nuts or I'm gonna get out of jail. Right? So that's how I did it. And you know, it took 27, 28 years, man, to actually, you know, to fill in these blanks to the point that I was exonerated, you know, of all charges, man. And what they did to me, I can't go into the details, right, because of pending litigation, but it was horrific. You know, it's bad what they did to us. It's bad, man. And we're glad that we made it. You know, we're glad that we made it. It's horrible.
So, Moo knows me. He knows I'm a bag of water. So anyway, it shouldn't take that kind of superhuman level focus to get what is right and just for y'all to be home with us. But I'm grateful that you stuck to it and that that you're here. And at least for 6 of those years, I saw Moo every week. And even with that singular focus, he was kind and you know, an incredible educator and did a million other things. I just don't know how that's possible. So salute to all 3 of you. And so now that you're home with us, and I want to say welcome again. I'm so glad so glad that y'all are on this side. But I'm even more glad that y'all are working to get more people home. And I know y'all have a deep sense of urgency about that. And certainly I would want all three of y'all to be my lawyer if I ever needed one. So kudos to you. But I want y'all to say more just about how you see yourself working with folks who are in the same situation that y'all were once in, and you know, what we can do to support. I know in Philadelphia we have both, you know, trying to do more work, because the key is getting lawyers who will actually listen to people they're supposed to represent and really be invested in their cases. On the other side, in terms of prevention, I know we have participatory defense hubs that we support all around the city for young people who have been arrested but not yet adjudicated, so they can be full participants in their adjudication. Not to mention just trying to, you know, get better DAs and all kinds of people in place until we abolish the system, so that they're less punitive, and we live in a particularly punitive state in Pennsylvania. So how do you all see yourselves working now that you're home?
Well, I can tell you that I never really stopped. So because you know, coming home, you get a brand new perspective, and you see how difficult it is to actually, like, for people to support people in prison with the litigation. You become more aware of the difficulties, like people living their lives and all the stuff that life presents to them out here, the things that pull on your time, and the people that advocate for people in prison it's remarkable. Like to cut out a piece of your life to do that kind of stuff is completely remarkable. And then you don't always get that when you're in prison. You don't always see that, but the time and the energy, the resources that you need, and for people to do that, it says a whole lot about who they are as individuals. But you know, before I left prison, I was helping several people, and I had vowed that I would stay active and trying to do things to actually get them to see a better day, to get them, I don't know if you could really call it justice, but at least you could get them in a position where they could get back to their families. So for me, the process never really stopped. It pulls on my time a lot because I do work a couple jobs, and but it's a very necessary thing. I gotta stay involved, because I remember myself what it was like to live with that kind of anxiety, to know that you needed to be somewhere and you couldn't be there. You know, to start realizing your potential in life, but then you couldn't do nothing with it because you was bogged down by this story or this narrative that was created by the Commonwealth, and the awesome task that it takes in order to come up out of it. They almost make it feel like it's a mission impossible. You know, for so many years, like, litigating and learning. There's like Bilal was saying, when you start to learn it, it becomes more painful because you start to waking up to a lot of different realities. Like when you're not litigating, you're more at peace. As crazy as that may sound, like when you fall back and you playing cards or something and you're not worrying about it, you don't have that stress that the litigation brings. So, you know, but what I do now is, like, I encourage the men that I left behind and the ones who I know that I can help. I stand by their side. Like there's a few guys, like when you in that environment, you know people who are innocent versus the people that are not innocent. So you become really aware of that group of people. Most of them stick together. Most of them have a familiarity with each other. And everybody, even though everybody's story is not always out there, people don't always talk about their cases, but you get a general feel of who's who, even without knowing all the particulars and all the stuff. Like, you know, like you just know from being around, like when you spending 27, 28, 26 years around individuals, you're gonna know. You know, so that's what I try to do. Like I try to stay involved. There's a couple cases that I have right now. The guy, we all helping, you know, move, Bilal. Sharif Brunson, Dwayne Brunson, Sharif. So we all trying to work on his case. There's another guy that I'm helping, a guy named Daniel Carter, trying to, get them back in court, try to get them to get the type of look from the Commonwealth that they deserve to have. Sometimes it's really difficult when you're out of court because they got all these mechanisms that block you out now. Like with the time bar and all that kind of stuff, it's hard to stay active. Like, even though I was active in court, there was a period of time when I was in prison. I believe it was only for a 2-year period, but there was a time when I was out of court for like 2 years. And that was like real difficult, extremely difficult. I can't imagine what it's like for somebody that's in prison and can't get in court, and they have a plethora of issues that needs to be heard, but you can't get in because you blocked out because of some legal mechanism that's preventing them from reviewing you. It's like you just existing, you just breathing air. It's a very difficult thing, like to be in that place and not have an avenue. So I try to provide that hope by getting guys back in there, so all you could do is stand by their side and just do all you can do, and let's see what happens.
Well, as for me, like to touch on what Giovanni mentioned, what we do is we try to help as much as we can. So what I did, I said, when I'm blessed to get out, if I'm blessed to get out, when I'm blessed to get out, I was going to give back. And I thought about it for some time. I said, well, I'm going to start a nonprofit. And that's what I did. I finally got around it, have an opportunity to do it. The nonprofit is called BIDDLE. BIDDLE is an acronym which means before it's too late. It has a bifurcated purpose, a bifurcated mission. The first part of the mission, or the front end of the mission, as we say, is to try to help the youth. We're dedicated to helping the youth not to go down the path that allows them to build these ideologies that leads to violence and incarceration before it's too late. And the back end of BIDDLE, we are dedicated to helping the wrongfully convicted regain their freedom before they die in jail, was BIDDLE. So besides all the like grassroots stuff that we do, like on a daily basis, like talk to lawyers for people, just talk to family members for people, put strategies together for people, explain our experiences to some family members, that people that need help and they're not organized. We try to organize people's help to bring them together, and give them some advice in terms of how to put their teams together and things like that. Because as Giovanni mentioned, in other words, failure is not an option. We're dealing with life and death here. We're dealing about death by incarceration. Some guys are on death row. We're dealing with children who are on their way leading down that road. So that's one of the biggest ways we're giving back. And we're helping people. We're talking to lawyers. We're talking to people's families. We get a plethora of calls from jail, and it's kind of difficult because the reality is that we're trying to put our lives back together, right? And at the same time, we're trying to help. So we got to strike the balance. And sometimes, it's very hard because we don't have the finances to help. It takes a lot of effort. So we try to develop people's family and support teams and try to get them to come together and explain to them. And then like our mere presence here now as free men is really is giving people hope. And that's something that you need. You need some type of hope to burn. Some of us, like myself, that pain is a serious motivator. And like Shakur said, you know, it's like Mission Impossible, man. And I kind of like Tom Cruise's movies, Mission Impossible, right? Because I mean, literally, sometimes trying to get to the law library was a mission impossible because all the things that's going on in the jail, man. You just trying to get to the library was a mission impossible. You know, the discipline that you got to have with all this pain and suffering to be able just to smile and just, you know, just to get to the library is a mission impossible. So we all believe the failure wasn't an option, man. You know, it wasn't an option. I mean, what you gonna do? You know, we're actually innocent. So I always used to say to everybody, if you innocent, act like it. Right?
You know, it's funny.
If you're innocent, act like it. So playing cards and, you know, all that other stuff that's frivolous, then, you know, act like it. And as he mentioned, we, one of our capitals in this whole scheme of things is that we learned how to be psychiatrists, psychologists, and we did everything but prescribe medication. So we're excellent readers of people because of our environment and what we've been through. And really as a defense mechanism, because it was a very dangerous place. So you had to develop, I mean, not only the law, I mean, it was so much so. And it's always that voice telling you to lay down and go to sleep. Because, you know, that's what that your trauma do, it make you sleepy. So, you know, you fighting that. So you drink some coffee, you eat a snack to try to get yourself up for the day. But we're taking all that experience, and what we're doing is we're just trying to help where we can. And we started this foundation. I'm the president and founder. Marco is the vice president and founder. And that's how we're trying to give back. You know, it can be from going to talk to a lawyer to giving somebody $100 to help them with some, some postage, talking to family members, just trying to encourage the people to keep on fighting, because we're living proof that, you know, it can happen. Right? To some people, this is fiction. Like, they can't believe that we're home. And the truth is sometimes stranger than fiction. You know, we're here, but some people can't believe that we're here. But we're actually here.
Yeah,
we're actually here. So we're trying to do the best we can.
I was just talking to one of the, matter of fact, the brother that Giovanni had mentioned, Dwayne Brunson. He said, you know what, this generation right here, with you guys going home, getting together to help people, this is unheard of. I've been incarcerated for 35 years and I've never seen that, because the norm is usually when people leave prison and this is on an average, they don't look back. They're not, especially not looking back to help another person get out of prison. So this is unheard of, the work that we do. I personally didn't tell anybody I was going to help them, because I already knew what I was going to do. And I knew enough about certain individuals' cases that I'm helping now that they didn't have to ask me to help them, or didn't have to guide me with respect to how to help them. So as Bilal mentioned, you know, we work for a nonprofit private interest law firm that obviously, and anybody that's familiar with nonprofits, you know, need support, financial support. So it's called Phillips Black Inc. You know, people that want to support and help that way, then, you know, you can look them up on the website. And then as well, our organization, BITL, B-I-T-L, you know, is also a nonprofit organization. And we draw from not only the limited resources that we have, but the legal expertise that we gain from this pain and suffering and being wrongfully convicted for almost 3 decades, right? And that's an experiential knowledge that you cannot teach at any law school. The firm that we work at, the lawyer, she states in every meeting practically that I've attended, Marco is the most knowledgeable about the law, or has the most experience about the law in this Zoom meeting. And we're amongst other lawyers, right? Because it's just, you can't, there's nothing like litigating from the trenches, from a point of disadvantage, that it allows you to gain a certain insight, right? and it creates an ability and a skill on how to strategize and how to maximize minimal resources, right? Minimal facts, a limited amount of details. So you're painting a picture, right, with just a limited amount of paint and half a canvas, and you're saying, okay, this is how I'm going. This is what I have to work with. So this is what I'm gonna utilize to the best of my ability. And I know Bilal mentioned coffee and snacks twice. I must say that when I was actually allowed to get back in court through the Third Circuit of the United States Circuit Court of Appeals, and they acknowledged that more likely than not that I was innocent, Bilal and I celebrated in his cell with some coffee and snacks. So I just wanted to point that out, that not only was it a way for us to stay up at night, right, and not only learn the law but also practice it, but it was also our way of celebrating those victories that came few and far in between, during 3 decades of litigation, right? And I must say that in many instances I drew on both Giovanni and Bilal as sources of inspiration, because I always viewed them as more knowledgeable than I with respect to the law, and I drew from them, their ability to litigate. And mind you, I want to emphasize, none of us came to prison with college degrees. None of us came to prison with a law degree. So now we're being asked to litigate on our own behalf as pro se litigants, learn a completely different language in a matter of weeks and months, where it takes people years, not only years of schooling, but also interning at law firms. And this goes to show you how unjust the system is, right? Because ignorance of the law is not an excuse. So the court, you can't present to the court this fact that when they ask you, do you understand what I'm saying or what I'm telling you right now? You can't tell the court no, because if you do, it's just like, okay, let's go on to the next question, right? I'm supposed to respond in the affirmative, because if I respond negatively, right, now it's creating another set of questions that ultimately are going to lead back to you answering yes, right? So it's the way it's designed. It's designed completely to place people such as ourselves, whether you're innocent, whether you're guilty, whether you're white, whether you're black, for the most part, impoverished, poor, people of color, you're just at a disadvantage. The presumption of innocence is a fallacy, right? And, it's a shame that, as citizens of the United States of America, we're being subjected to procedures in the court of law that resemble certain countries that we look at as third world, communistic or socialistic in many respects, and we look down upon, right? And I'll end on this note. A buddy of mine, he was a pro se litigant. He had a hearing, and he said that the judge kept denying every motion that he kept proposing. And he just got to the point. He said, Your Honor, you denied every motion that I proposed to the court. I might as well have a trial in North Korea or China. This is the perspective, right, or perception that people in this country have, that when you step in that court of law, that it's going to be fair and just, when in reality it isn't.
Thank you. All right. I know I have another question, but I'm gonna not hog the questions, and I'm gonna open it up for a Q&A and turn back to our wonderful colleague, Professor Gonzalez Van Cleve, and open it up to questions from those who are with us today.
Well, this has been amazing. So I just want to thank everybody for sharing their stories. One of the inspirations for this panel was that when I was researching Crook County, which is a book about the criminal courts in Chicago, I noticed that pro se defendants were abused by multiple system actors, judges, sheriffs, even public defenders that were kind of supposedly on duty to supposedly support people that were representing themselves. So can you all talk a little bit about how the system actors, whichever ones you've encountered, made it more difficult or helped? I mean, so whatever that is. And then also for those who are listening who may not understand, you know, what does a prison law library look like? I mean, there is this kind of, you know, Professor Johnson kind of dispelled the you know, some ideas at the beginning, but some people don't get to see what it looks like. What's it like in the prison law library, and what were you kind of up against? Like what tools did they give you, and how difficult and easy was it to get there?
Well, I can tell you that when I came home and I went to Widener University and I saw their law library, I said, man, this is crazy. That joint was incredible. It was incredible when I saw their law library versus what we had. You know, like the computers that they gave access to eventually, they were all limited in terms of your research ability. Like I said, one of the best tools that you had was the law reviews. You still needed outside support in order to get cases and stuff sent into you, because something could come down and you may not have access to it without that kind of assistance. But essentially, well, at Graterford, the law library consisted of you know, some outdated books. You know, they did their best to keep in like the law reviews, the legal intelligentsias. You know, but you just have to be proactive in going after this information. You know, like we used to all share information. When something come down, you know, we read something, then we try to share it with everybody so that everybody, if it affects you, then you at least have some information in that regard. But the law library was very basic. Not a whole lot to work with. You know, you might try to pick up a book and the pages is missing, where you need to get a case, you missing the pages because somebody done ripped the pages out, and you got to go through all that kind of stuff.
But tell them why the person ripped it out.
They ripped it out because they don't want nobody to read their case.
Or they can't afford copies.
Or they can't afford the copies. So as opposed to trying to find a means to get the copies, they're just like deprive everybody else and just rip it out the book. And then they you know, there's a whole lot of different reasons and stuff like that too. You know, guys who just, you have some guys that's just like kind of like I don't want to say like mean spirited, but you know, they would interfere with litigation. Like they would take stuff out the book because they don't want nobody else to know about it, because they don't want other people bringing it into court. Like, I'm gonna get in on this first. It was like that kind of, like, you know, you go through that kind of stuff. But I said, like, in terms of like what you had access to, like Bilal, I believe you had one. I had a brother's typewriter, like a little word processor that's like completely outdated out here, you know, but that's all I had to work with, was like a little teeny word processor that held maybe about 8 pages, you know, and, you know, motion maybe about 12 pages. I got to print that out and then go back and try to get something else in. And everything was extremely limited. But the only thing that wasn't limited was, you know, your desire to keep fighting. That had no limit to it. So you will find creative ways to fill in the missing pieces. But again, like the law library was like a really basic thing. Like whatever the DOC provided was just like bare minimum. And that's essentially, that was it. And like, it was like, one of the things that I remember is that they would call everything that was non-important before they called the things that was important. Like they would call the yard, the gym, and law libraries, educational, all that stuff was always last. Y'all remember that? It was always last.
Yeah, you're referring to the line movement. Yeah.
It had no real significance in terms of the way the institution was running. So it just let you know where they stood at. Like they would rather put that stuff last as opposed to putting the most important stuff first. But you know, like it really wasn't much. Some outdated computers and, you know, print. And then you had like one printer that everybody had to use, and it's been getting jammed up all the time, and you can't get nothing printed out, and it was crazy. But you know.
And what about the guards and the the lawyers and anybody, was there folks that stood in your way that, beyond the printer breaking, what else was,
The
what other
guards.
factors?
The
Well,
guards for sure. So let's
Well-
just say if you needed to get down to the law library and you didn't get a pass because they might have messed up the pass system or stuff like that. So you try to get entry into the law library. They see you every day. They know what you do, but they won't allow you entrance because your pass might not be right. And they messed it up by not putting you on the list. So it's another thing that you might miss the law library when you got something that you really, really need to get in court, or you really need to do some research. You really need to get in there, and you prevent it from doing it. So then you had the lockdowns, stuff like that interfered. Then you had the staff may not show up, and that interfered. There was all kinds of stuff that was going on. But one of the biggest things that I encountered was guards who were really, really standing your way, and they would use the pass system. If you could be in the law library, they're coming in and get you, tell you got to leave because you're not on the list.
And it was intentional?
Yeah,
Definitely.
Did it affect the judge? Were you ever late? Was anybody ever late
So
because of these actions? It's down the stairwell.
Well,
So-
let me.
go ahead, Bilal.
Go ahead. Well, what I understood was that this was a business, right? So somebody's benefiting from this here pain and suffering, right? That's judges, that's lawyers, that's district attorneys, that's all types of police officers, whether street police or the guards. They were benefiting from us being there. So those who had this mentality tried to make sure that we stayed there. And they did all they could to frustrate the efforts. For example, I used to go through so many things with the clerk of courts down at the CJC and City Hall about my filings. And, it was frustrating, right? When I went to the United States Supreme Court, I used to tell Shakur, Giovanni, Yahya, and Marco, they're trying to kill me on a postage. I'm a pro se litigation. I'm a pro se litigant. Although ignorance is no excuse ignorance is no excuse. Under Houston versus Lack, United States Supreme Court. On another hand, they're supposed to view my case pro se liberally, right? They're supposed to give me all the benefit of the doubt because I'm a pro se litigant, right? So I was going up to the United States Supreme Court. They made me file this thing 3 times because of one little error. So these are the type of things, whether it was the lawyers, they believe that you're guilty, or so they think you're guilty. The judges, their clerks. I mean, it was a whole peripheral of things that stood in our way. That's why that analogy of the Mission Impossible, that's exactly what it was. And keeping in mind that it's capitalism. So people are actually benefiting from chaos. They actually want you there. Right? The judges, the DA, the lawyers, they want you there for whatever reason. So you're up against that as well. These different ideologies, you got your just desserts, rights, essentialism, all these things that a judge may have as an undercurrent of why he makes his decisions, right? So you're putting up with all that, and you have to fight all that. We used to study the judges. We used to do reconnaissance work on the judges, what school they went to, what organization are they a part of, who's their clerk, what school did they go to, what did they study, just so we can try to get a grasp of how to write toward their, he used to read Shakespeare. So I'm quoting Shakespeare in my writings. Finding quotes, trying to read all it. I mean, it was a mess. So we had all these things to contend with.
Right.
Along with, for example, some of the guards, they just say, you know, they didn't like that they was litigating. So what I did, I said, and anybody can attest to this that know me, I'm going to make my cell a library. And that's exactly what I did.
Yeah.
I made my cell a library. So in the event that all these things was happening around us, I could sit in my cell and litigate.
That's
So
an
I didn't,
important point too.
right. I had all types of books in my cell. Somebody say, you need something? I say, buy this book for me. Send this book up here. And I literally turned jail to Yale, prison to big house in a Harvard. That's exactly what I did. I had paperwork everywhere. When the guards used to come in my cell, you got too much paperwork. And I used to pull a memo out. Just the memo. This is all legal work and religious material, right? All these books they accounted for. I got receipts for everything. And I had to do that because when the jail was locked down, if I wasn't litigating, I didn't know what I would have lost my mind.
Right.
I couldn't take it. I had to be, because this is the only way I was staying alive. The only way I was staying sane and alive, if you want to call it that, and fighting this trauma, was to be able to pick these books up and this law stuff, because like Marco and Giovanni mentioned, we didn't really have nobody to ask, a professor of law. We didn't really have it. So we had to study harder, right? And you know, just trying to get to the library, you know, going other ways to try to get to the library because we're trying to duck a particular guard,
right?
who doesn't like you because you're not playing cards. He doesn't like you because you're going to the law library every single chance you get. You're at the library. So he don't like you for that. So you got to get around him. You know, so I mean, I can't begin to mention the things that stood in our way, right? I'm gonna give you one more example before I pass the move. Just one more.
All right.
We used to, like, guys wouldn't certify their mail, right? Sometimes they didn't have the money or they just was tight. I certified everything. And every day I would hear someone say, the courts or the lawyer say they didn't get my documentation. And you had people trying to say, don't certify the mail.
Mm-hmm.
I said, okay, don't certify it and watch it what you go through. Certification mail, for those who don't know, is a tracking of your mail and they have to sign for it. I got boxes of certified mail slips, boxes of them, just the slips, to be able to prove that I filed this document in court.
And is that why, because it came from Graterford, did the letter go missing? Is that what you're saying?
Sometimes
Just
not.
to be very clear.
No.
Yeah.
And Bilal, so I filed 2 post-conviction relief applications. One languished for 8 years in suspense. I was ultimately denied on that one. I filed another one after going through my round of appeals, and that one languished for 7 years in suspension. So that was 15 years of just waiting for the judge, the PCRA judge, to rule on my petition, right? And I won't reiterate everything that was mentioned before, but I did take a glance, and Ko, I hope I'm not taking this is not being too forward, but I noticed one of the questions, and this is a transition, right? From what we're talking about. One of the questions posed by the audience was, what resources were available to us with our reentry and our reintegration back into society? I don't know if we want to, transition.
Sure.
That's okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. So one thing about being actually innocent and wrongfully convicted when you're released, meaning that you're not on parole, probation, or any type of paperwork, when you're released from prison, under those circumstances, you don't have any resources available to you. I literally was kicked out of the institution. So from one day to the next, I went from being a person that was sentenced to death by incarceration, sentenced to die in prison, and the very next day, I was literally being forced out of the prison. And when I was released, I'm talking about I was released into society with no resources available, or no resources provided to me by the state. Ironically, had I been released on parole, I would have had resources provided to me by the Department of Corrections and the state of Pennsylvania, right? So there goes the contrast, right? And to show you how unjust and oppressive the system continues to be, even after you're released from a wrongful conviction.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think I have to ask this question, which is how much of the feeling of what happened to you, all of this, was racism? I mean, how could you articulate how this was a racist system? Everything from the guard saying you don't belong in the law library, you should be playing cards. Tell me more about that, how it was palpable to you.
And just to emphasize, right? We know that systems of oppression are predominantly rooted in racist ideals and racism. That goes without question. Many of our institutions in this society are inherently racist, right? They have their history in racism and in slavery, and this is something that the United States history can't distance itself from. Although we try to in a lot of different ways by highlighting exceptionalism and so forth and so on. However, specifically dealing with impoverished neighborhoods, predominantly minority neighborhoods. I myself come from a predominantly Hispanic neighborhood that was drug infested and crime ridden. When I went to court, everyone in the courtroom was white. Prosecutor, my attorney, the judge. The judge actually called me a 19-year-old Puerto Rican, right? Which I've never been referred to that way. I don't know if that was a racial slander or not, right? But he was trying to say, I guess he was trying to say Puerto Rican. So it was just starting from the very beginning, I saw, and all my interactions with the police from as a youth to that point were predominantly racially driven, right? Racial profiling, driving while Black or, Hispanic, our interactions with police were always negative, were always scrutinized and viewed in a way as if I was always up to something, even though I wasn't, right? So going through the system, you see how you're subjected to this ideal, an ideal of culture that many of us don't relate to because we're not from the predominant culture, right? So we're not from a white culture, the predominant culture or the dominant culture in this country. So there's certain language, certain vernacular, certain cultural characteristics that we just can't relate to. And that is also inherent in the system, right? So now while we're going through the system, we're being subjected to all these different norms, aside from being ignorant of the law, right? So now it gets to the point where, you feel so slighted and helpless. I remember feeling helpless when I was in the courtroom because I knew all these lies were being projected and believed, right, by an all-white court, right, an all-white system, and I'm the only Hispanic sitting at the defense table, right? And it's like, okay, I'm definitely going to get found guilty, and I'm definitely going to prison. So it's this system that's rooted and inherently flawed, right? It's rooted in racism, but it's inherently flawed because all the processes associated with it come from this ideal or this position of superiority, right? And it flexes its power in every sense of the word, right? Versus people of color, right? People who are poor and people who are disadvantaged.
Yeah, Dred Scott, that's how we lived it, for a long time. And there's no rights no rights of a Black man that a white man got to respect. That's what we lived it, and we know everybody is not racist that's in the system, but the foundations is built upon that. We still playing with the 13th Amendment, right? So all those, those forces, some of them, they're very alive, in law enforcement. They're very alive. You know, and you be feeling this Dred Scott thing, you know, you want to have hope, you want to believe in, you know, but going through that process, it was beat out of you. You know, it was beat out of you through the pain and suffering, man, the trauma. It was beat out of you, man, because you just know that, you know, it took so long because I was a minority. You know, it happened, I believe, large part of it was at the end of the day, thinking about it, contemplating the powers that be. It came down to, you know, he's you know, he ain't nobody. You know, he ain't got no money. He ain't nobody. We're gonna do what we want to do to him. You know, and that's exactly what they did. And you know, a larger part of that is racism, man. You know, that would allow you to know a person's actually innocent. You got the evidence that at minimum should make you pause at probable cause. It should make you pause. But you know, it's you know, racism plays a part, I believe, a strong part, and justice is not blind. It actually sees what color you are.
Ain't no doubt. Ain't no doubt.
Just to kind of like highlight that, y'all may recall it was one of these years. There was a big thing about some of the judges on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court was making certain statements that was in racial nature, and it was like a big thing. And you would think that stuff like that. I mean, it came out. Some of these comments was made in secret, but then they came out some kind of way. And you know, you would think that somebody was sitting on the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, which is the highest court in, well, at least on the state level. You would think that, you know, that stuff would not be in that kind of conversation or behind closed doors. You look for more of a fairness, or but it exists. Like sometimes it's crazy to hear that kind of stuff, but it permeates throughout the system. Like, you know, like the same thing with Moo, all white court. You know, you go in there, prosecutor white, the judge is white, the lawyers is white, and everything that's being said, it affects you the most. And it's like everybody having a conversation around you, but you're being affected by it. And it's like, and a lot of it is, at least initially, it flies right over your head. You don't even know what the hell is going on, because you don't have the type of knowledge that you need to have in terms of like what's going on. I like, for instance, like I remember when I was in court, and you know, like I had adult co-defendants, so I was the only juvenile that was on trial with adult co-defendants. And you know, although I was like a block away from the incident, I had no knowledge of what was going on. They held me accountable for the actions of adults. Like, and there's no other area in life where that happens at. There's no area in life where you hold a child responsible for the actions of an adult, except in criminal law. And I thought that was like extremely unfair when, you know, they paint a picture of you as being like you came out evil from birth. It's like they make it seem like you was just really a bad person from birth. And I had no history, no arrest record. I was in school, I was working and everything, like, but none of that was a factor. And they just create these crazy narratives, like, and you try to overcome it. And there's a lot of, you know, like you could just look at the history, like, you know, it's like is they always creating something. Like even from slavery, you got slavery, then it went like, I believe it was like Jim Crow, separate but equal. Then you got mass incarceration. It's always something. They just changing it up as you go. It's like, it's crazy, but that, like, they got these things that they've been doing over these many years that has so many resemblance to the last situation. They just put it into another form to justify it. That's all they do. That's all they do is put it in a way where it could be more acceptable.
It's politically correct.
Can I add something really quick, Nicole? So in the same vein, I believe I saw that it's like 95% of the prosecutors in this country are white, right? And that's a big part of the problem, right? They're predominantly white. I'm not saying that they're racist, right? Obviously, just because you're white, you're not racist, but what we need to do, and leaving here, if we're thinking about one way we can contribute on how to change the system, what we need to do is we need to change this absolute immunity for prosecutors. It's a crime that a prosecutor can withhold exculpatory evidence in a person's case, knowing that that person is innocent, send them to prison for either to death row or for the rest of their life. And when that case is overturned, nothing happens to that prosecutor. So we need to change that law. We need to change that law. Absolute immunity for prosecutors. We need to change that law.
And recently, for the students listening, they've doubled down on Connick versus, I think it's Thompson versus Connick.
Yes, I'm in the middle of a lecture, Brown University, right?
They've doubled down on that decision to protect prosecutors, regardless of whether they were framing people or setting them up. So Connick, for those who don't know, Harry Connick Sr. was in New Orleans and planting evidence on people, and you know, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg called it a tinderbox, if you will, tinderbox of injustice. And so I think that's absolutely the case. There, you know, one of the students, we're running on time. We started a little late because of technical difficulties, so thanks for bearing with us. But I want to get to this one question about, you know, incarceration having a cascading effect, impacting other people. So not just your lives that, you know, that you were in prison, but also the people that.
All right, I gotta get somebody call up there.
So you know, maybe we can round it up by telling me how did
hit me back tonight or tomorrow. Thank you, man.
Hold on, Nicole. Hey, yeah, Bilal, mute your camera, Bilal. We can hear you.
It's okay. It's okay. So how did this impact the folks around you, neighbors, friends?
Pardon me.
No, it's okay. It's okay. What was the impact on the family? You know, either your life course of the people that were around you, because I know it has cascading effects, if you will. Yeah.
So my family, I was fortunate. They supported me from the very beginning. They visited me, you know, supported me both financially and through visits for you know, close to 28 years. During that time, you know, I met a lot of people, and they became, you know, avid supporters of myself as well. And in many instances, you know, through you know, my academic pursuits and my organizational activity within the institution, I networked, met many people, both academics and friends alike, who provided much support. Actually met the love of my life as well, you know. So it's been in many instances the main reason, right? The main reason why my transition has been so smooth since my release from prison, right? Housing, employment, you know, security, a sense of peace, you know, just being able, you know, to have transportation, right? In large part has, you know, been due to their support. Now, just as much as I suffered, I will go on to say that those who were the closest to me suffered just as much. I lost my aunt that raised me about 8 months before I was released, and she never stopped, you know, hoping that I would be released from prison up until she you know, she passed away. She suffered. My brother, you know, he was 14 years old when I came to prison. He suffered. I believe he suffered the most. But you know, family, you know, all family is not family. So I'm gonna say the ones who I was really close to and really had a relationship with before coming to prison, they definitely were impacted, you know, harshly by my incarceration.
Yeah, I think, you know, everybody who goes through that shares pretty much the same story. Like, you know, one of my biggest supporters from day one was, you know, my mom. The funny thing is that, when because I went to prison at 16, such a young age, it was like I was being cared for, like at a time where I should have been like taking care of myself. That process never stopped. Like it went into like, it always continued in my life. I always had somebody like there taking care of me. And my mom was like one of my biggest supporters. I wound up losing her to cancer while I was in prison. And, you start seeing family, additions to your family, people having children, and, they don't even know who you are. The list goes on and on. You kind of feel like an outcast a little bit. You try to stay connected as much as you can. And for me, like, the effects of it is great because I come from a big family. Like I'm the youngest of 12. I got 12 siblings. I got one sister and 11 brothers, and everybody got children except for me. I'm like the only one that ain't got no kids, because of the circumstances. Played a big part in that. And coming home, trying to meet everybody, trying to fit your way back into like what's already like kind of structure. People used to you not being around, so now you're around, and everybody trying to get to understand who you are today. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it don't, because you may be at odds because you come from a controlled environment and you more organized, and then you see there's disorganization that exists, and it kind of like don't even sit right with you. Like why is this happening this way, and why everybody is at odds? And it's a whole lot going on there. So your absence, like it creates a void in your life. And like now, like even today, like I'm living on my own. I live. There's some family members that live close to me, but for the most part, like I'm on my own, and I think that's kind of like the effects of incarceration. Even though like I got family, I'm close to it, but you see like the separations inside the family too. Like everybody's grouped up, and it shouldn't be that way, but that's how I go, like. But I still have my father. My father, like 90 years old now, and he's still hanging in there. He's something else though. Like I don't know, no, I don't know nobody act like this guy. This guy is something else. But he was a big supporter. We didn't have the best relationship. I mean, it was some good stuff that came out of it. We wasn't really close when I was younger. We actually got really close when I got in that type of situation. And after my mom passed, he picked up the mantle, continued supporting me until the day I walked out. And he was there. We developed a better relationship. I go check on him every day. He drive me crazy sometimes, but it's all good. But for the most part, like you definitely feel the effects of it. I was gone for 26 years. So it was a big absence. There's so many people in my family I don't even know. So many people that don't even know me, and because I'm in the process of rebuilding, and I've been home before Bilal and Moo and stuff like that. So it's just a continuous process. It's trying to get back in there. I'm coming up on like I believe it's my 4th year. In September to be like 4 years home, but I'm still in the red. I'm like, I'm still in the red because most of my life has been in prison. Like I got several more years to go before I get into the black. Like, so, it's a difficult process, but you gotta keep, pushing on and stuff like that. So,
Thank you. Well,
Yes,
do you want to have the last word?
Yeah, well, to concur what they said, I mean, I can't say it no better than what they said. We all experience death in the family. We lost supporters and things like that, and it's being out here, man. It's just constant work, and we need support from our family and friends, and it's it's a struggle. It's a struggle in different ways. And we're here, you know, cautiously optimistic, and that we would that we try our best to put some things back together. And you know, we're doing that. We're trying real hard. And I always say teamwork make a dream work. So, you know, we're trying to, because some people just not gonna be able to give me the advice and talk to me like my fellow comrades would. That's one of the things that I'm suffering from now, is trying to talk to someone who hasn't been through what I've been through. So sometimes they don't know what to say. Sometimes it's just best to just don't say nothing.
Yeah.
You know, just listen to me, right? And we came from a controlled environment. So like, we're able to sense control freaks, for lack of better words. We're able to like, and sometimes that's misread. Sometimes it's sincere advice. So we have to like take extra time to process some of those things. You know, so it's you know, it's a lot. It's a lot. But you know, it's a lot, man. So, but I mean, it's work. Hopefully, it's working itself out. You know, we're getting it together. You know, as we say, slow and methodical. You know, we're trying to put the pieces back together. You know, we cautiously optimistic that, you know, things are, you know, it won't be normal to the normalcy of if we didn't go through what we went through, but you know, we're making the best of it. You know, it's a struggle, but you know, you say we're either going to swim or we're going to drown. So the thing is that we just got to keep on swimming. You know, swim upstream.
One of the things I like to add before we close out, right? I mean, it was a question a little bit back when you was asking about the support, the type of support we have when we come out, right? You know, I just like to, you know, let everybody know that's listening, like we really become our best support network. You know, like because like for instance, like because I came home before Mu and Bilal, I was able to get a little bit more established before they were. So when they came home, you know, I was so happy that they were home and stuff like that. I would prepare myself for them coming home by putting money to the side for them, you know. So when they came home, we could take them shopping, we could put a couple dollars in their pockets and stuff like that. And because I understood that transition, I went through that transition, and you know, people helped me now. So the people that was close to me, like Mu and Bilal, I tried to make them feel like ease back into a smoother transition. So it's been like a really helpful thing for me, and a good thing that I was able to do stuff like that. And I'm, you know, like I said, we are our best support network. So, you know, we do things for each other too. So when the state is not doing things, then we doing it for ourselves. So, you know.
Thank you so
and it
much.
works out.
I'm just inspired by these stories. I'm glad that we've now preserved the legacy of your firm, your law firm. I mean, it's just an amazing story. It's an amazing effort. It tells us so much about the criminal justice system and what it does. So thank you so much. I want to thank Professor Nina Johnson for moderating it and allowing me to ask my questions. And thank you to everybody who attended. So thanks a lot to the center.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Have a great night, everyone.
You too.
You too.
Bye-bye. Thank you.